A 15-year-old girl shot and killed a teacher and a fellow student yesterday at a Christian school in Madison, Wisconsin. And an explosion in Moscow has killed a Russian lieutenant general. Good morning. I'm Corva Coleman from NPR News, and here are today's top stories. Police in Madison, Wisconsin say a 15-year-old student shot and killed a teacher and another student and injured several others yesterday at a Christian school. NPR's Meg Anderson reports Madison Police Chief Sean Barnes says the shooter then took her own life.
At a press conference Monday, Chief Barnes said the police department is still working to determine a motive in the shooting. He said the shooting happened in a study hall, and a 911 call from the school came in shortly before 11 a.m. That call was made by a second grader. As parents waited at a reunification center to hear about their children's safety, pastors from other churches came to offer them comfort. Adam Penning was one of them.
What I saw today were parents who have this instinct, which is when their kid falls and skins their knee. They've always been able to jump in to help.
But he said this time all they could do was wait, sometimes for hours, to find out if their kid was okay. Meg Anderson, NPR News, Madison.
President Biden hosted a Hanukkah celebration at the White House last night. He says he is committed to getting all hostages out of Gaza. Biden says he realizes the celebration is coming as many hearts are heavy.
It's the second Hanukkah since the horrors of October 7th. Over 1,000 slaughtered, hundreds taken hostage.
He says he won't rest until the remaining hostages in Gaza are free. Israeli officials are in Qatar negotiating the terms of a ceasefire in Gaza. NPR's Daniel Estrin reports from Tel Aviv the ceasefire could begin before President Biden leaves office.
An official familiar with the Gaza ceasefire negotiations says mediators are the closest they've been to finalizing a deal in more than a year. Speaking on condition of anonymity because of the sensitivity of the talks, the official says the ceasefire would begin before President Biden leaves office and would last around 6 weeks. Israel would release Palestinian prisoners and detainees. In exchange, Hamas would release some of the Israeli hostages, all the women, men above the age of 50, and hostages with medical conditions. The official says Israeli troops would partially withdraw from areas of Gaza, Israel would boost humanitarian aid, and both sides would continue talks to free the remaining hostages and end the war. Daniel Estrin, NPR News, Tel Aviv.
President-elect Trump gave a press conference for more than an hour yesterday at his Florida resort. He covered several topics. He says he recently talked with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, and Trump said if the hostages aren't freed by the time he is inaugurated, quote, all hell is going to break out. Trump says he has spoken to more than 100 world leaders since his election, and he insists China's president has not ruled out coming to watch his inauguration. China has not officially commented. A Russian lieutenant general has been killed in Moscow. He was accused of overseeing chemical and biological warfare in Ukraine. NPR's Joanna Kakissis reports from Kyiv. It's the highest-profile killing of a Russian military official away from the front line since Russia invaded Ukraine.
Russian law enforcement authorities said in a statement that Igor Kirillov and one of his aides were killed after an explosive device planted in a scooter was set off. The scooter was near the entrance to a residential building in southeastern Moscow, where Kirillov apparently lived. Ukraine's leadership has not publicly commented on the killing. However, Ukrainian prosecutors did charge Kirillov on Monday with the use of banned chemical weapons on the front line. Ukraine's security service says Russia has used chemical weapons nearly 5,000 times in the war. Joanna Kakissis, NPR News, Kyiv.
A catastrophic earthquake rocked the South Pacific island nation of Vanuatu today. Its magnitude was 7.3. Damage is widespread. The U.S. Embassy says it suffered significant damage, but that all its personnel safely evacuated. From member station KPRG in Guam, Nina Rowe has more.
The earthquake struck just off Port Vila, Vanuatu's capital. Tsunami warnings were briefly issued for Vanuatu and surrounding areas, though those alerts have now been lifted. Finau Leveni is the deputy head of the delegation for the Red Cross Pacific. She says ongoing connectivity issues make it difficult to assess the extent of damage.
We know that Vanuatu Red Cross is very well stocked and they're a response agency, so most likely they are already responding to the needs on the ground.
She adds that Red Cross partners across the region are mobilizing so they can provide immediate support when communications are restored. For NPR News, I'm Naina Rao in Guam.
Scientists suggest that the rings around the planet Saturn could be a lot older than they look. They could be as old as Saturn itself. Instead of being about 400 million years old, the rings could be a whopping 4.5 billion years older. The study is published in the journal Nature. The Senate Judiciary Committee reviews legislation today putting stricter rules on sports gambling in the U.S. The Supreme Court legalized sports betting in 2018. NPR's Windsor Johnston reports it's since grown into a multi-billion-dollar industry.
The legislation is designed to address the public health effects linked to sports gambling. The proposals include set limits on advertising during peak hours, enforcing affordability checks, and establishing deposit limits. The bill would also include new rules around the use of artificial intelligence by U.S. sportsbooks and online casinos. Supporters of the federal legislation argue the changes are needed to address gambling addiction. According to the National Council on Problem Gambling, nearly 50% of sports wagering in the U.S. takes place online via smartphone. Critics call the bill overreach into state-regulated markets. Windsor Johnston, NPR News, Washington.
I'm Corva Coleman, NPR News in Washington.